So the government of anArchy.com is a reference to governance. So some people might imagine it's anarchy, I don't like government, and try to tear it down. At one perspective, if it makes any sense. I'm not sure they're trying to tear the garden down, but they might be in some places. They might determine, hey, I want to tear down a building or deconstruct some surveillance hardware, or go after stalkers, or go after a war, or whatever they decide to try and tear apart. And there's also the government of that construction, which might try to prevent such a deconstructive attitude. And the government of the other perspective is literally the governance of anarchy, and relative to the government of causing anarchy. So in this situation, you have to, there's a choice. Given enough information to topple everything, did you choose to try and control the situation or manage the situation, and what did you do to try and resolve it? Or you're just like, look, I'm going to tear it to pieces. So there's two perspectives known in the government of anarchy, and not entirely complete. Where some people might allege it's only a two-perspective model, the reality, again, is the number of perspectives available relative to a point. So, some people might allege a police department governs anarchy when people fight, or a businessman governs anarchy when, his employees come to work and he notices they're standing around, and, he's trying to make some money. So, a criminal organization might allege they govern anarchy among, a bunch of criminals. And, it really depends on how you look at it. But again, some of the attitudes for anarchists might not care about any of those organizations or institutions relative to some beliefs. So there's one portion of it, and then another portion of it indicates a willingness to understand governance, or to govern the situations of. And where in some situations there's a natural government, the planet, the environment, the trees, the grass, etc., etc. And when I consider, the order that is shown, there's another governance. So trying to understand the models of governance available there, and across all of these, I've applied a rule, and it's something that I've discovered at Quantum and Quantum Bell. And the rule means radio U-line light equals energy, which is an equation I discovered, and the first part's really a container. And so there's a natural energy, which is measurable, it's part of a U-line, or some sort of additive, which is considered unnatural or dangerous or deadly. And the concern for me is really just organized crime. And it could be more heavily attributed to other problems as a more skilled person evaluates it, I think. So there's a rule, and as part of the anarchy, some people might say, oh, it's an absence of rule that they pervert, and I think that would be a wrong assessment of this perspective of the government of anarchy, because the rule is pretty much what holds the planet together, if it makes any sense. So it also, keeps a lot of stuff together. It powers the atmospheres, makes planets spherical, and it's not the only factor, it's just a piece of. But, as these planets are turning to stuff, it helps to work the surface of the planet, because the perspective of the U-line model is not the same at every position on the surface. So as that planet moves or turns, it works the surface into a sphere, and that's why the stars and the planets are spherical. So the U-line measurement in the rule helped to understand why it's a sphere, or how a star maintains its shape. As when the rule transfers its energy to the surface, that energy flows into the planet, and it's a form of gravity. It also keeps the dirt here, and molecules and stuff like that. So without getting too heavily into the details of the rule, even an anarchist might say the rule is necessary, but you're really talking about environment. So I'm not sure it's the same kind of rule we're talking about, because I'm not really going to argue for either perspective. So the governance of, again, where some person might alleging the one perspective, the other perspective might say, wait, it's a natural and it's unnatural that you're doing that, because it feel it's making people crazy or something, and you know, or it's being used as a weapon, and it's a deviation from what's been here for hundreds of millions of years. You know, so when you compare one energy environment to another, so the necessity for argument of the rule is also an attribute of the activity or the symptoms of people affected, you know, by additives, including radios or microwaves or, you know, whatever's added to that metric of a U-line measurement talked about at theoryrelativity.net. And the government of anarchy is a complicated topic. Now, if you read the website, the humans sold it to us for 99 pieces of zinc coated in copper, and, you know, the equivalent of, you know, so with a blank slate. So across this, now noted at that website, if you check it out, there's another tool page, and it's got the same kind of tools on there, including the compass, but it's a shadow angle. So we have the light perspective angle, and then we have the shade, the shadow angle, if it makes any sense. And if you know anything about a shadow, it is an area of precisely less information to that perspective where the light's shining. And what that means is, if you see this right here, you see the light over there, I'm in the shadow now, and now I have precisely less information. I cannot see that light at this distance as this part of the gradient for the perspective model. And when you're referencing a light government, those guys would be dancing around in the light over there. You know what I mean? If you reference a shadow government, they're dancing around in the shadows over there. And both of the organizations use each for safety. So one might stay in the light because it's safer, you know, and they feel safer there, and the other one might stay in the shadows because they find it contributes to success. So there's a lot of considerations relative to the person or the self or some assortment of every object out here has a perspective to, you know, what I'm seeing here, this light and the shadows that are created. So, you know, governments and persons or animals often governed by the calendars and the motions of the, you know, the moon or the stars and the relative to the sun. So there's a lot of reference to my construction or me as anyone, if it makes any sense there. And I'll go back and edit this. It's nothing official on this. I'm just gonna post it and see what it sounds like. But the two angles are relative to a mass, and of course there is other attributes for the construction of this. So across this also, it's already been referenced, is there's arc law, which is ARCH law, and there's arc law, which is ARC, and ARK, which is arc law. So a law relative to some construction, so the government of an area or a home or a community or among men, or even the self-construction or the construction of a physical asset, or the construction of a tree. Arc law is spark, so we already explained that one. And then arc law is an understanding of an established or known direction for interpreting belief and service to the planet, and or those actions as an individual, or interpretation of argument among men, or interpretation of, you know, however it can be applied. And this also is presented, and not as a definite, but as an aspect of understanding these topics. So the government of anarchy, the government of anarch or a spark, the government of anarch, which is, you know, belief, and for the arc of life for me, and the government of anarch, the government of some construction. So these are the 4 sites in that website group, and in the next audio I'll talk about the others.